Everybody, welcome to the panel. We're going to talk a little bit about digital transformations and their challenges, I think. I'm the moderator, which I hope means I don't have to answer any questions, but I don't think that's true, but anyway. So I thought maybe we'd all introduce ourselves. I'm a solutions engineer at Confluence, so I'm basically one of the vendors in this conference, but I spend a lot of my time talking to enterprise architects and trying to help them navigate how we start. I watch on the sidelines as you guys try and figure out how to bring new technology into your enterprises. Antoine, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so yes, I'm head of enterprise and architecture and technology at La Redoute. So we are a European-based e-commerce retailer. And personally, I'm fighting is not the right word, but I would say balancing perspective between business division to IT division to avoid local and silo optimization. So to really cross the points between what we want to do at the end for the business and what everyone is doing transversally. So yeah, this is my daily fight, I would say, to do the good choice transversally.
And Andrew?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Andrew Lewthwaite. Probably similar position to you, Mick, maybe here, in that I'm also here as part of a vendor, Evolution. So I work as a consultant for Evolution. So we effectively have an enterprise architecture tool, and I guess what I do is trying to help customers build solutions to some of the problems they're facing. Again, just trying to look at kind of putting things into context for them. From different perspectives, which is always quite nice having someone external come in. So that's pretty much what I do at Evolution.
Cool. And Alex, last but not least.
Hi everybody, I'm Alex Kolinko. I'm a platform architect for Bayer, and before that I was enterprise architect for multiple companies, including John Deere, ZF, Deutsche Post, DHL, Ergo, and some others. And now we are at my company at Bayer. Now we are in the middle of a huge transition that we have from internal IT to more provider-oriented IT.
Cool. Thanks for that. I think we've got a very international gang here. We've got an Englishman, an Irishman, somebody from France, and I hesitate to guess where Alex is from, but I guess it's somewhere in Germany or further east.
In Germany, right?
Yeah.
In Germany.
Cool. So I think maybe my first point of discussion is successful transformations, or could you give an example of talking about I do success, but it sounds like you're in the middle of a transformation. Your transformation from self-managed IT to relying more on providers for individual pieces of it.
Yeah, exactly. So just to give you some impressions on the transformation program we are undergoing at the moment. We have an IT with something like 5,000 people, and now we are moving a large portion of that to service providers, to multiple service providers, and during that transition, we have a landscape of something like 8,000 business applications with also multiple thousands of servers and all that stuff. And in the middle of that transition, we're also moving from the on-premise IT to cloud-based IT. So there are a lot of stuff that is undergoing, that is going on at the moment, and we manage our transition with help of ServiceNow and Inspire products built on ServiceNow, where we steer our transition based on business capabilities and also on the catalogs of possible CIs or possible infrastructure items.
Sounds very interesting, because I guess you can't stop the business, right? There's various multinationals spread across like probably the whole world.
That's true. That gives another complexity, because thanks for mentioning that. In a sense, we are also within that transition. We are also consolidating ourselves. So we had a central IT, but we also had a country-based IT, and within that transition, we also moving towards regional hubs in a sense, and also reducing our country presence.
I guess that matches well with the move to the cloud, right? If you're starting to use software as a service, that's kind of naturally centralized, even if the usage of it is distributed. Everybody uses the same tool for the same function, for CRM or for trouble ticketing or whatever.
Exactly. So that is the motivation, of course, and underlying business motivation is also reduce costs and also to be more scalable and flexible.
I think that's a kind of common enough theme that we hear, right? The agility. Antoine, are you in the middle of a transformation as well?
Yeah. So we have done. So we are also adopting cloud since about 2 years. I would say carefully. So not saying we go very slowly, but we know that the cloud provider are there to make money. So it's not everything is not magic going to the cloud. So we are quite careful on portability of our services, on which services we select to put in the cloud. And if we make a choice, we ranked it globally in terms of portability for future use. And in fact, we can accept on some specific services if we assume the lifespan of the services is like 2-3 years. We don't really care of the high lock-in, because we assume that in 2-3 years it's highly likely that we replace it with something else. But in the contrary, with core business services that we know are there to stay, we are much more, I would say, strict on the choices that we implement and to reduce the possible lock-in, both in terms of, I would say, cloud offer lock-in, and also the technical solution we took. So this is why we have an approach on where it makes sense and it's mature open source technologies. Also for us, it's quite something we are really keen on. And for example, rely on managed services on top of open source solution have been for us a good compromise. So again, not for everything, and sometimes open source falls short and it's not mature enough. But it's one approach we did. And we have also migrated, so if I simplified our IT system, we have all the digital interactions and the backend and the backbone. And clearly on all the digital platform e-commerce, we migrate that fully to the cloud in a lift and shift approach about 9 months ago. And right now we are dealing with an incremental architecture roadmap to modernize by function. We modularize specific function to really benefit from cloud capabilities, and to avoid to pay the hotel to the family 2-3 years, because we lift and shift it quite costly at the end. You are doing
there's no
hosting on cloud. So
there's very little that when you talk about business value, it's very hard to motivate a business value for shift, right?
Yeah, no. For us, the lift and shift reason we are not mature enough internally to leverage cloud capabilities. So we did a lift and shift project because also we had an ending contract on our data center, and it was better, I would say, in a mid-term perspective, it was the first step. When we did that, we built our team in terms of cloud competencies, and this is what enabled us just after the product is going live to start modernizing it directly, because we did a lift and shift, but we passed everything as code. So I would say we are quite fast now to iterate and capture business value from this iteration, and we are doing this, so the iteration are driven by business value. So we take really either specific features or today scalability issues we see in the platform with concrete facts, and we solve them leveraging specific cloud solution, and again applying our metrics like lifespan, time span of usage, portability, and vendor lock-in perspective. Yeah.
That's a very, very interesting perspective to think about how long you think the service will be alive for. I think I heard a number of people talking about it today already. Like we often talk about systems of record and systems of innovation. Do you find that it splits down that easily, or is it, sometimes you don't really know?
Yeah, it's quite. In fact, it's a difficulty we have. It's to forecast. I would say it's quite difficult nowadays. So this is why we rely usually on the. It's quite easy for existing business services, I would say, because we have some historic track record, etc. And we also have a strategic initiative that we can match to say, okay, potentially we will impact these business services. But I would say the issue, but it's good for us, is that the business is transforming, and we have like new thing coming out we didn't plan. And this is the tricky thing to deal with, because we need to decide on something we have very low visibility. So here we are much more focusing, I would say, on the keeping flexibility in the choice we make. So I would say it does not mean we take only a solution that is 100% portable, etc. But we really more invest into the decoupling of the specific services in how it's deployed and managed, to say if tomorrow we need to change it, at least its interface and integration is relatively easy to move. It's not like a massive project and a Spider-Man project, when I say when you need to redo everything all around. So yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess your timetable was accelerated a lot by, like, when you say 9 months ago, it's kind of a, right in the middle of the burning heart of the first wave of COVID, right? So I guess you suddenly became an online retailer. I know La Redoute was originally mostly catalogs, right?
Yeah, exactly. And up to 2015, we transformed a lot to the 2017 to a quite 96% digital sales model, e-commerce.
So one of the poster childs for that, but I can imagine the volume just increased like crazy, right?
Yeah. But each time I see the analytics, I'm thinking like it's a supermarket cashier, You see all the people that are at the payment page at a single point in time, and you know that any issue you have, you are losing X money, so you still okay. You can still assume a part of the customer will come back, etc. But the reality is they go elsewhere. So, it's quite critical for us, all digital services and transformation, and this is why we are quite careful. Not in a way we are slow, but we go step by step. We don't want to say like we know everything. We go directly to the cloud. We are very good, and then we miss a step. And I'm convinced it can be quite costly to try to rush steps in the maturity stages of adoption. Clearly, because we see it was not really a technology problem or topic. It's more organizational maturity in terms of aligning the decision criteria, the technology also, but it's more people and organizational interaction maturity we need to build.
Yeah. Andrew, have you run into situations where it's the organizational maturity that kind of blocks the adoption of these digital platforms?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a couple of aspects there from a maturity perspective. We kind of face both aspects of this kind of like a team maturity, let's say, and it's like a data maturity. So I think a lot of the times the teams might feel like they're kind of ready to move in those directions, but realistically, they probably don't really have a good understanding maybe of where they are now and how they're actually going to be able to migrate that effectively. So there's kind of things that we've done internally to help customers like kind of build like these cloud readiness assessments and things like that, just to help them get a bit more of like an objective approach to whether things are viable to be moved to the cloud. And that includes, integrations that need to be set up, regulations, where the data is stored, all of that stuff can kind of raise quite a few blockers on the way, I think, which is always a difficulty.
Yeah, that's something that's near and dear to my heart because I run into it a lot, right? So, when you have, especially with GDPR, when you've got customer data, or even worse, Schrems 2, I don't know how much noise there is in your organizations about that. Like, Alex, have you had to deal with these sort of end customer related data privacy issues, or is your business more B2B, so it's more kind of back end stuff?
Bayer has 3 divisions. One of them is pharmaceutical, one of them is life science and crop science in a sense, and the third one is consumer health. So we are not, we are probably not so strong with dealing with individual customers. So of course we have some, but that is, our focus is rather B2B. And as our divisions, they also have very different regulatory requirements, and that doesn't mean that we don't have any challenges on that, but these are rather different ones, like GXP and foreign trade law, that kind of stuff. But
I guess, they're still minefields to be negotiated though before. Like I suspect a lot of the reasons why it's almost like a semi-organizational issue, that one of the biggest challenges we have is, as architects, we run into too late in the process these regulatory challenges that say, well, we have this great idea that we use these services, but then bang, we can't because we have to meet some pharma compliance regulation for the EU, or we have some data sovereignty regulation that we weren't yet aware of. I think it's
exactly, and that is the value of having a centralized repository. That is kind of answer to all to some of the most pressing topics. And if your organization doesn't have such a repository in place, it's going to be very difficult. And that is the reason why our company has decided some years ago to consolidate IT process management on ServiceNow.
That actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So, Antoine, when you're doing your transformation, I think you kind of alluded to the fact that do you have a skills problem, or how do you deal with access to the right skill sets that you need in order to move quickly in using the services?
Yeah, but we had to balance a bit depending on our maturity level, where we start on a specific project. But I would say from left to right, if we are at a level 0 internally, we don't take strategic project first. And then for the skills, we really try to get expertise. But every time we have done that, even when it was not cloud, when it was other technologies, it was we always selected partners that want to grow with us. So what I want to say is that we don't want partners that want to create dependency with us. Like we never learn by ourselves. So we always looked for people that have a mindset. So like they do for us in the beginning together. They train us. We build a team. Then they have people that stay in our team. Like half of their team remains. In the meanwhile, we train and hire specific teams. And this is our approach, to don't be dependent too much time, because the key for me in midterm is to have internal capabilities. So not 100%, but you need, for me, internal capabilities, and also to drive mid to long-term choices. And we also build a specific partnership with so either companies or schools that are really offering specific training. So sometimes it's not only school for people that are ending the master degree or whatever. It's really people that are certified in specific certification or training, like Google Cloud Consultant or that type of stuff. And we managed to have some partnership here to be able to attract talent. We share also our learning experience with concrete case study, and we can also hire some specific people from there. And we also started to rely much more, and it's also accelerated since COVID, on all mock massive online courses. So again, for learning, we need a variety of things, but we relied a lot on that, dedicated half a day for people per week to be able to train and practice, because for me the key is you need to learn, to listen, read, and whatever, but after you need to practice. So we invest a lot on that, and distributed community of practice between the teams. So like with internal employees, and we also would say push a lot the people to, so more for the technological perspective, to participate in all meetup and related communities, to learn with peers and concrete cases. But even with all of those actions, we still have globally the same problem as everyone, is that there is a shortage of digital talent and technological talent. So yeah, we are really trying to have this like curve of we get expertise and we try really to capitalize on internal resources on a mid-term one. And this is really the model we try to follow.
I think we're all in competition with the digital native companies for the talent, right? It was mentioned earlier on today as well that you're the software. If the company is software, then you're competing with software engineers for where is an exciting place to work, and they need to keep their skills up to date as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Alex, I was just thinking, what sort of challenges have you run into when you're introducing digital platforms into Bayer?
Well,
the people skills as well, or is it more moving the organization along with you?
I would say the current situation and the running transformation within our company is the biggest challenge, because if you think last years we needed to integrate Monsanto completely into our landscape and into our processes, and then even not completed that, we needed to undergo that transformation towards more external provider oriented IT, and that's kind of context and surrounding where everything is changing. That is probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, you mean the idea that you're reorganizing constantly, or
Absolutely. Yeah. I think every company has that situation that they are reorganizing constantly, but just having those major shifts like integration of Monsanto, or then move towards more external provider-oriented IT, where roughly 1/3 of the employees of IT employees move to other provider. Also, that is the challenge, and that is also the challenge that influences so much the establishment of digital platforms.
I was listening to one of the people from the local authority in Denmark who was talking about the challenges where when you do that, the people who made decisions, the tribal knowledge of why the system looks like it is kind of lost. Is that something when you said earlier the idea of the catalog-based approach with ServiceNow, do you find that helps you to address that?
Absolutely, because a lot of responsibility is changing. A lot of people are moving, getting new positions, also moving to other providers and getting maybe other customers within their new organization. So if we hadn't had that, we I can say we would not be able to move forward. But luckily enough, we have introduced ServiceNow platform, and we have just completed some projects that established ServiceNow as a central IT platform, and that helps us a lot by doing that transformation. So, for example, for the planning of the transformation to the providers and to the cloud environment, we completely relied on our catalog of business application and the catalog of application services within ServiceNow. So that helped us to plan the whole transition, because you can imagine we have something like 7,000 applications, and each of them we needed to have a look individually and decide whether or not we move that particular application and how we move that particular application. Is it lift and shift, or is it re-engineering? That kind of decisions need to be done, and for that you also need to know the interfaces, you need to know the responsible people, and you need to know the architecture. That was a major challenge also, where our Inspire-based solution for enterprise architecture management help us to cope with that task.
Yeah, Andrew seems like he's violently agreeing with you then.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it's something that we face a lot of the time when we deal with customers, which is, I think the key thing there, like this central repository, is important, because a lot of the time when we're dealing with these situations, you talk about things like your application catalogs there and which ones are viable, which ones should be changed and moved. A lot of the time it tends to be quite, let's say, subjective. You kind of think it should be moved because of X, Y, and Z, and we've tried to maybe take a more of objective approach of measuring why things should be moved or could be moved. So whether it's things like surveys and how many processes does it support, and is it using out-of-date technology, all of that kind of stuff can kind of feed into the smarter way of making those decisions. And for us, I think more so than ever, it's not really been kind of too much of a technology hurdle. It's always been kind of like a people hurdle, where I guess the kind of customers we deal with are not necessarily, let's say, resistant to change, but they're resistant to being changed. And a lot of the time it's because they don't really have any transparency of what's going on. And as soon as you start exposing that, as soon as you start exposing what the plans are, what the roadmap is, I think that's when you can start getting more people on board to kind of be on the same page, if you like.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That these initiatives are you make a lot of changes and then trying to justify either which changes are necessary, trying to justify them up front, or then measuring, did you actually get the outcome you expected. I think it can be difficult.
Yeah, especially when you're putting those business cases together as well. And I think a lot of the time there has to be options available. We talk extensively earlier on through some of the WebExes we did about these kind of different scenarios that you're planning, and there has to be options available. So when you go through things like cloud migration, you're refactoring stuff, and repurchasing stuff, or actually building stuff from scratch, there has to be a balance of what the outcomes are. Is it more cost efficient? Is it reduce the complexity internally? Are more people on board with this type of change than this one? So that's always a fine balance. I think it's quite difficult at times.
Well, Antoine brought up earlier that often the cloud services have a cost associated with them, right? So the TCO, or the business justification as to why would you stop doing what you're doing now and take one part of your catalog and move it to an external provider is going to be something that everybody has to deal with. Right? Antoine, do you do a lot of measurement of this stuff, or how do you
the business case exercise? You mean?
I guess you do a lot of A/B testing in your front end. Do you do also A/B testing in your enterprise architecture?
But this in fact is more on like it's live and we need to iterate, etc. And the problem. But here, if we are doing A/B tests, it means that we are already validated to work on this feature and deploy it, etc. The issue we have in our funnel, it's like the problem of everyone. It's like you have too much ideas and you have this amount of resources, like the funnel. So our problem is more to limit the work in progress at the start of the funnel. And it's really not easy, in fact, because yes, when you start to talk about business case, it's quite easy to measure like IT savings, ROI on that, etc. You say, okay, I do that, and then we should gain that if we get rid of what is existing. But then for me, it's quite hard to forecast cloud cost, for example. So this is the first point. And I only talk about IT perspective because after you hardly measure also, I would say, the gain in operational efficiency. So you can measure, for example, if I get managed services, I will save X hours of internal IT work. You can do that. But you hardly measure the other impact of integration, added complexity, dependency. So for me, it's a problem of what we can't measure. And on a business perspective, I think it's quite also like we can, I think, in a single business case, try to forecast to say with this feature, I expect this type of customer and prospect and this type of transformation and revenue. The issue is that if you want to compare ideas between them, it means that you are able to build like a comparable business case in terms of business value. And this is quite hard, in fact, because you have agility, additional revenue, existing revenue. It can be like a never-ending topic. So this is why we are a bit more working in we allocate resources per major area of the business, and when it's feature team, it's per feature team. And then yes, we do a bit like what you were saying. People are more working like with OKR type, and they have a sponsor, etc., and they need to show results based on their iteration. But I would say because the overall business case is that to do them every 2 or 3 months, it's quite complex. We can do like an IT blueprint every 2-3 years to identify the key area of change. And okay, we need to invest drastically on this, on that. This we need to do it. But then I would say it's much more difficult on the, operational basis. So in the middle after, when you need to prioritize project between them, for me, it's still a very hard exercise. To be factual, at least. You can have a gut feeling and like a executive push or whatever. Be factual and comparable.
We talk about becoming data-driven in our dealings with our customers, but also in our own thoughts and views on how we're going to do stuff. It's very hard to have enough to justify, if I do this, then I'll have this outcome, and if I do that, I'll have this much better outcome, right?
And measure it after on, because when you do a feature to try to measure that it's the cause and effect relationship, for me, it's quite hard to measure, to validate. That you say this feature brings this revenue. You have changed so much things in the landscape at the same time. So for me, it's quite
very hard to
exercise.
be scientific, and we can't roll the clock backwards either.
Yeah.
If you did this, you didn't do that, so you don't know which. We are where we are, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How do we keep the stakeholders engaged? I guess that's a challenge, right? If we're in enterprise architecture, often we're not sitting on the business problem. We're kind of a cleanliness function, shall we say, that is trying to bring best practice to people who maybe we don't always hold. Enterprise architecture rarely holds the budget. There's a business side who have something they want to do. Is there any tips and tricks you have for dealing with them? Or Antoine, I guess.
Yeah, but for me, it's a tricky exercise because you need to, join different perspective and vision and different background of people. So it's quite hard. Normally, executive and sponsorship don't want to pass a lot of time in your explanation, etc. So you have like 3 sides to explain your point and convince. So for me, this is a hard exercise. So what we have find that work much more is to link the enterprise architecture with the operating model. and to talk about scenarios directly. So don't try like to sell the magic 10 picture we want to do or something like that. We focus more on operating model. So what is the impact between the decision we took on the enterprise architecture and the operating model? Because this talk clearly to all the executive, to all the board member. And when we want to propose and to have like an agreement or something, we always talk in scenario and cases. So we don't do like a big scheme of enterprise architecture with a lot of arrows and flow and things like that, because here it's your shot is out, it's a technical guy, we don't care. So we're really trying to explain and simplify views. I would say for me the key also is to be able to, and this is not easy because normally you have very structuring decision and the issues are in the complexity. But you need to be able to draw the synthetic picture that only highlights the key problems you want to show. So this is why the exercise we do is always this one, is focusing on operating model and explain trade-off between 1, 2, or 3 scenarios. And normally we always took in the scenario today and then 2 scenarios we have in mind. But we always show the today to say if we do nothing, this is what we guess and we plan will happen. And then we propose main 2 course of action. So to don't do like all the possible combination, etc. We just say, okay, normally like 2, 3 slide. This is the problem. This is the alternative. And then we can discuss. But this is the exercise we do. And to do that on a regular basis, I would say on a strategic initiative part. So this is something we do rather like a yearly update, or every 6 months big update of all initiative, etc. We try to be much more coherent. So we do on an IT part, or I would say more transversal committees exercise, but I would say to get executive commitment and interest, we more want to do it like on a regular basis. For me, it's a bit like IT. It's if the board of directors always heard to talk about IT when there is an incident, they think like IT is full of incidents. So you need to talk with them with positive thing in the meanwhile, so that they have like positive, negative, and they get a more realistic view of what you are doing.
So Alex, is this, I guess you have the same challenge. Is the German approach different from the French approach?
Well, it's a rather big question. But in that particular area, I would add to what Antoine said 2 things. First, it's important to deliver value. It's important to deliver value to the stakeholders, and as soon as they recognize that enterprise architecture is delivering value, they are kind of involved. And the second one, and that is also something that we are practicing, enterprise architecture also should own some budget. So we need, we would like, and we have that possibility to do some architectural work without asking for additional money from our divisions, in a sense. That is recognized, and we also are able to co-finance some initiatives of the divisions that has also enterprise architecture impact. And those two levers help us to move forward for the enterprise architecture.
Now we have a lot of people listening to this who want to move to Germany, I think, right? EAs with their own budget sounds like a wonderful world. Yeah, but no, I think that's a great idea. Andrew, have you ever come across such a beast before?
I mean, I agree with the simplification thing, and I think there has also probably caveat that with levels of abstraction, because you can simplify things, and like you said, you can simplify things too much sometimes. So knowing your audience and having levels of abstraction where you can kind of deep dive into the details if they're interested, so that there's maybe a level of confidence in the fact that you have proposed the right solution, you haven't just plucked a number from the air. I think, I mean, one of the things we face from an enterprise architecture perspective and customers is there's still seemingly a tendency to, and I see this maybe too often, to rely on these kind of architectural views and diagrams that to the user, to the guy who's modeling these situations is useful, but to those stakeholders who have to make the decision, it really isn't. They really don't want to know what type of notation you've used and the intricacies of the models you've built. They need to know these kind of headline stats and figures. And I think that's always a bridge that's sometimes difficult to cross, is trying to translate those models you've built into, like you said, Alexa, which is real deliverables, something that's tangible, something that they can understand. But also taking into account that some of the stakeholders these days are so much more technically adept at understanding the detail, and they want to understand it. So you still have to have those models to back up these kind of decisions that are being made.
Yeah.
So it is a kind of a constant thing, really.
Well, like as I said in my talk earlier, I was very surprised to see the Nordea CEO or CIO talking about technology. Right? CIOs are technologists, but they very rarely talk about technology. They're very much big picture guys, right? And I don't know whether it's a shift or not. I think we're certainly, maybe because everything digital has become so important this year, it's front of mind at all levels in companies, because we're all working remotely, as you can see, right? There's nobody who's sitting in an office here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe Antoine is. I don't think so. It's probably his kitchen.
No. Yeah, no.
So it's been this huge shift. I think we're kind of running down the clock here, but I think this has been a really interesting conversation, and thank you everybody for sharing your points of view. And this has been a really good architecture show. Actually, I think there's been lots of great discussion, and it's a pity we're not all actually in the same place. I can imagine it'd be lots of fun running around in the corridors, right?
Mm-hmm.